welcome to our deep dive into the fascinating world of indirect suggestion in hypnosis.
Oh, wow.
Today, we're going to explore some excerpts from Stephen Brooks's training course, and I have a feeling we're in for some serious aha moments.
I think so.
Ready to have your mind bent a little?
Oh, absolutely. Indirect suggestion is a powerful tool, much more subtle and nuanced than the traditional direct hypnosis you might be picturing.
Right. Forget the swinging pocket watches and you are getting sleepy stuff.
Yeah.
We're talking about influencing behavior in a way that flies under the radar of the conscious mind.
It's almost like a backdoor approach to the subconscious. Direct suggestions can sometimes trigger resistance, people pushing back against that idea of being controlled.
Right.
But indirect suggestion works by planting seeds of thought, allowing the unconscious mind to accept them without that conscious pushback.
That's a great way to put it. And Brooks gives some seriously mind-blowing examples in this training. Like imagine asking someone, do you want to go into a trance in this chair or that chair? It sounds like a simple choice, right?
But what's fascinating here is that the question itself embeds a powerful presupposition. It's not if you'll go into a trance, but where it sets up that expectation in the unconscious mind.
I'm already starting to see how this can be so effective.
Yeah.
It's not about forcing anything, but rather guiding someone towards a desired state without them even realizing it's happening.
Exactly.
Wow.
And it gets even more subtle than that.
Oh, really?
Brooks talks about how tonality and even a single word can completely change the meaning of a sentence.
I'm intrigued. Okay, give me an example.
Okay, he uses the phrase, you can do this, versus, oh, you can do this. The words are identical, but the addition of that, oh, completely shifts the implication, doesn't it?
It totally does.
Yeah.
It's like in the first one, you're expressing confidence, but in the second, you're almost expressing doubt.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that seemingly insignificant change can have a huge impact on how the message is received by the unconscious mind.
This is getting seriously deep, and I'm loving it. So we're starting to see how language and even nonverbal cues can be used to influence people on a subconscious level.
Right.
Brooks actually believes these techniques were discovered by accident.
Oh, really?
He says therapists were sometimes unknowingly being hypnotized by their own patients.
Yes. He suggests it was like the patients were unconsciously using hypnotic language on their therapists, leading to some surprising responses.
Wow.
It was almost as if the therapists were picking up on those subtle cues and entering a trance state themselves.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this idea of direct versus indirect hypnosis a bit more.
Good.
You mentioned that direct suggestions can sometimes backfire.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's because they trigger that you can't control my mind kind of resistance.
Exactly. Direct suggestions can feel too confrontational, triggering the conscious mind's defenses.
Right.
It's like trying to force open a locked door.
Yeah.
But indirect suggestions work more subtly, like a key that gently unlocks the door to the subconscious.
That's such a great analogy.
Right.
And Brooks's demonstration with Dave and Cheryl really highlights this, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
In the beginning, Dave was using a more traditional, direct approach with Cheryl. There was this palpable tension, almost like Cheryl was resisting the process.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Brooks kept jumping in and suggesting alternative ways to phrase things, making them more indirect and adaptable to Cheryl's responses in real time.
Yeah.
It was like a master class in flexibility.
Right. Like when Dave said, your eyes are getting heavy, Brooks suggested he wait until Cheryl naturally started blinking slowly and then use the word heavy to coincide with that behavior.
It was such a subtle shift, but it made all the difference.
What's brilliant about this approach is that you're pacing and leading.
Okay.
You pace the person's current experience with a truism, something undeniably true at that moment, and then you lead them toward the desired state. It's all about aligning with their experience rather than posing something external.
So in that example, the truism was Cheryl's blinking, and the lead was associating the word heavy with that feeling.
Exactly.
That's genius. And then Dave's tonality started to slow down and deepen to match Cheryl's breathing.
Yeah.
It was like he was mirroring her state to build that connection and guide her deeper.
Exactly. That kind of nonverbal mirroring is incredibly powerful in building rapport and trust.
Right.
It creates a sense of harmony and understanding, making the person more receptive to suggestions.
Okay, so we're seeing how language and observation are key here.
Right.
But Brooks goes beyond general principles.
Yeah.
He delves into specific language patterns that are designed to work beneath the surface. He calls them yes sets.
Yes, the yes sets.
Okay.
Think of it this way.
Okay.
You ask a series of questions that the person will naturally answer yes to,
Uh-huh.
a string of undeniable truths.
It's like building a foundation of agreement. Right.
Right, precisely.
Okay.
By creating that pattern of yes, you make the listener unconsciously more open to the suggestions that follow. Their mind is already in that yes momentum.
Okay, I have to admit, it's starting to sound a little manipulative,
Oh.
but I can't deny it's incredibly clever.
Well, hold on, because then we get to the reverse yes set, which takes this concept to a whole new level.
A reverse yes set. Now I'm really curious.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
It's a bit counterintuitive, but incredibly effective.
Okay.
Essentially, you emphasize what the person wouldn't do,
Mhm.
but in a way that actually reinforces the desired outcome.
Okay, that sounds super tricky.
Yeah.
Give me an example.
Brooks gives a great one.
Okay.
He says, going into a trance before you sit down in the chair is inappropriate, isn't it?
Mm.
The answer is obviously yes. But what's brilliant is that by stating what's not appropriate, you're subtly implying what is appropriate.
I see it. It's like you're planting the suggestion by highlighting its opposite.
And there was this whole debate in the training about whether, gosh, it's very dry in here, isn't it? Qualified as a reverse yes set.
Oh, really?
It was fascinating to see even the experts dissecting these language patterns.
I love those moments when you see people who are clearly masters of their craft
Mhm.
still getting excited about the nuances. It
Yeah.
shows how much depth there is to this.
Right.
Okay, so we've got yes sets, reverse yes sets. What other sneaky language tricks does Brooks have up his sleeve?
Well, he briefly mentions embedded commands, which are direct commands subtly woven into seemingly innocuous sentences.
Hmm.
It's like hiding a message in plain sight.
Okay.
But before we get too deep into specific techniques,
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand the bigger picture of how these suggestions actually work on the mind.
Okay, yes, let's zoom out a bit.
Okay.
We've talked about bypassing the conscious mind, using language patterns, and tapping into the power of the unconscious.
Yeah.
But how does all of this actually come together? What's
Yeah.
the underlying mechanism?
Well, Brooks talks about the conscious and unconscious mind operating on different levels and responding to different types of language.
Hmm.
The conscious mind is that critical, analytical part of us, always filtering information and making judgments.
Right.
But the unconscious mind is more receptive,
Mhm.
more open to suggestion.
So with indirect suggestion, you're essentially bypassing that critical filter of the conscious mind and speaking directly to the more receptive part of us.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's where those language patterns and subtle cues come into play.
Hmm.
They're designed to slip past the conscious mind's defenses and plant those seeds of suggestion directly into the fertile ground of the unconscious.
I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how the mind works and then using language in a way that aligns with those natural processes.
Uh-huh.
It's like speaking the language of the unconscious.
Precisely.
Wow.
And Brooks even suggests visualizing the brain and directing suggestions to different sides, almost like you're having two separate conversations at once.
That's a fascinating concept.
Yeah, I can see how that would help to really target those suggestions effectively.
And then there's this concept of binds, which sounds a bit ominous, but is actually quite clever.
Okay, binds. I'm intrigued.
Okay.
Let's dive into that.
Essentially, a bind gives the illusion of choice while still leading to a specific outcome.
Okay.
It's like offering someone two options, but both options lead to the same desired result.
I think I'm starting to see how that works.
Yeah.
It's like that chair example we talked about earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to go into a trance in this chair or that chair?
Right.
You're offering a choice, but the outcome going into a trance is already implied.
Exactly. Brooks uses the example of asking, do you think your hands will move closer together or move apart for you to go into a deep trance?
Right.
Again, the choice is there, but the suggestion going into a deep trance is subtly embedded within the question itself.
This is genius.
It's
It's like you're outsmarting the conscious mind by giving it something to focus on, while you sneak in the real suggestion to the unconscious.
Okay.
And then there are double binds, which operate on an even deeper level, tapping into the unconscious mind's tendency to seek resolution.
Double binds. Okay, I think I need a little more on that one. Can you break it down for me?
A double bind presents two choices, neither of which can be consciously resolved. This creates a sort of mental puzzle that forces the unconscious mind to find a solution, often leading to a trance state as a way to escape the paradox.
So it's like presenting the mind with a riddle that can only be solved by going into a trance. That's fascinating.
Right.
Do you have an example of a double bind?
Brooks used a great one with Cheryl.
Okay.
He asks her, do you think your right hand can feel warmer than your left hand? or your left hand warmer than your right.
Wow.
Now, logically, she can't consciously know the answer to that.
Right.
Her unconscious mind has to step in and provide a solution.
Hmm.
And as she focuses on those sensations, she's already entering a trance state.
Wow, I'm starting to see how powerful these techniques can be. But then he takes it even further with this whole dissociation and confusion thing.
Yeah,
That sounds a little intense.
it does, doesn't it?
I'm picturing a hypnotist just stringing together a bunch of nonsensical words,
Right.
but I'm guessing it's a bit more sophisticated than that.
Oh, much more.
Okay.
It's about using subtle language patterns, often playing with concepts of right and left, or conscious and unconscious, to create a sense of disorientation.
Right.
And the key here is to always follow that confusion with concrete, direct suggestions.
So you're essentially confusing the conscious mind to create an opening for the unconscious to receive those suggestions more readily.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like creating a diversion so that you can slip past the guards and deliver your message directly to the command center.
I love that analogy. It really helps to visualize how these techniques are working.
Good. And Brooks shared this funny story about a student who was observing him do a demonstration.
Oh, yeah.
This student was convinced that Brooks was intentionally varying his touch to anchor different states in the subject.
Oh, really?
But Brooks wasn't even aware of doing it.
That's amazing. It
Yeah.
shows how the unconscious mind can be so incredibly subtle and yet so influential.
Right.
It's like we're constantly communicating on multiple levels without even realizing it.
Exactly.
Wow.
And as we become more aware of these processes, we can start to harness their power for healing, growth, and transformation.
Right.
But before we get too carried away with all the possibilities,
Yeah.
I think it's important to acknowledge the potential ethical considerations of wielding such powerful tools.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
We'll definitely need to delve into that a bit more.
Okay.
But for now, I think we've covered a lot of ground in understanding the basics of indirect suggestion.
Yes, we have.
Okay.
We've explored the differences between direct and indirect hypnosis, delved into some fascinating language patterns, and started to grasp the underlying mechanisms at play.
This is seriously mind-bending stuff, and I'm sure our listeners are already starting to see the world with a new set of eyes.
I hope so. It's all about awareness, about paying attention to the subtle ways in which language and communication can shape our thoughts and behaviors.
And who knows, maybe they'll even start to notice these techniques being used in their everyday lives.
It's more common than you might think.
Really?
From advertising to politics to our personal relationships, indirect suggestion is all around us.
Okay. I'm officially on high alert now. But before we go out there and start analyzing every conversation, let's take a quick break and then come back to explore some more advanced techniques and real-world applications of indirect suggestion.
Welcome back to our deep dive into indirect suggestion. It's amazing how much depth there is to indirect suggestion when you really start to explore it.
It's true. And I think one of the most mind-blowing concepts we touched on before the break was this idea of separating commands directed at the conscious and unconscious minds.
Absolutely.
Right.
Brooks emphasizes that the conscious and unconscious minds respond to different types of language, so it's about crafting your suggestions accordingly.
I'm really curious about this.
Yeah.
He mentioned visualizing the brain and directing suggestions to different sides, almost like having two separate conversations at once. How does that work in practice?
It's a fascinating approach.
Mm.
Essentially, while you're engaging the conscious mind with something like a truism or a simple instruction, you simultaneously deliver a more potent suggestion to the unconscious.
So it's like a distraction technique.
Yeah.
You're keeping the conscious mind occupied while the real work is happening beneath the surface.
You could think of it that way.
Okay.
And Brooks demonstrated this beautifully in his session with Cheryl.
Right.
He would say something like, your conscious mind can just think of something different while your unconscious mind listens without you having to listen.
I remember that. It was fascinating how he used his voice, his tonality, and pauses to emphasize the separation between those commands.
Yeah.
It felt like he was speaking in two different voices, addressing two different parts of her mind.
It's subtle, but incredibly effective.
Right.
And you don't have to explicitly use the words conscious and unconscious. You can use metaphors like the back of your mind or the front of your mind to make it more natural.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're essentially speaking in code using language that the unconscious mind understands, but the conscious mind might not fully grasp.
Exactly. It's like planting those seeds of suggestion in the subconscious, allowing them to germinate and grow without interference from the conscious mind's doubts or resistance.
I love that analogy.
Thanks.
It feels so much more elegant than just trying to force a suggestion through sheer willpower.
Right.
And speaking of elegant, Brooks also mentioned this double dissociation, double bind thing, which sounded incredibly complex.
It is a bit of a mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Essentially, it's about creating a double dissociation, asking the person to experience two contradictory things at the same time.
Okay, I'm struggling to picture what that would look like.
Okay.
Give me an example.
He used a brilliant one for inducing catalepsy, which is a state of muscular rigidity. He said, you can experience a rigidity without knowing that it's there, and know that it's rigid without knowing how you discovered it.
Wow, that's a mind bender. So you're basically asking the person to be aware of something without being aware of it.
Yes.
Wow.
It creates a mental paradox that the conscious mind can't resolve.
Hmm.
And since the unconscious mind always strives for coherence, it often responds by entering a trance state, a way to escape the paradox.
So you're using confusion as a tool to open up a direct line to the unconscious.
Uh-huh.
That's fascinating. And I'm guessing this technique can be used for all sorts of hypnotic phenomena, not just catalepsy.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Brooks talked about using it for inducing hallucinations, for example.
Right.
He gave the suggestion, you can see things that are not really here or believe that they are here without being able to see them.
It's like you're blurring the lines between reality and imagination, creating a space where anything is possible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By presenting these contradictory choices,
Mm-hmm.
you bypass the conscious mind's filters and tap into that raw creative power of the unconscious.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture of how indirect suggestion works.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the different levels of the mind and using language artfully to access those deeper states of consciousness.
And it's a skill that takes practice.
Right.
Brooks encouraged his students to write lists of indirect suggestions, really getting a feel for the structure and the nuances of the language.
It's like learning a new language, right? The more you practice, the more fluent you become,
Right.
and eventually it starts to flow naturally, almost effortlessly.
Exactly. It's not about memorizing scripts or following rigid formulas. It's about developing that deep understanding of the mind and then using language as an art form to create change.
It's like becoming a mental magician. And speaking of magical, Brooks shared a really interesting story about a student who was watching him work. The student was convinced Brooks was intentionally varying his touch to anchor different states in the subject.
Oh, yes. But the funny thing is, Brooks wasn't even aware of doing it.
That just goes to show you how powerful the unconscious mind can be, how we're constantly communicating and influencing each other on these subtle levels without even realizing it.
It's truly remarkable. And I think it highlights the importance of awareness, of being mindful of the messages we're sending and receiving both consciously and unconsciously.
Right, because with this kind of knowledge comes a certain responsibility.
Yeah,
We need to be mindful of how we're using these techniques.
absolutely.
Right.
As with any form of influence, it's crucial to use it ethically with respect for the autonomy of others.
Okay.
But beyond the ethics, there's also a simple awareness that's important to cultivate.
Right.
We may not always be able to control the indirect suggestions we encounter, but we can learn to recognize them and choose how we respond.
That's a great point. So it's about empowering ourselves to be more conscious participants in the communication process, to not be swayed by those subtle influences without our consent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about taking back our power and choosing how we want to respond to the world around us.
I love that. And one thing that really stood out to me in Brooks's training was how he used these techniques to help people transform their dream experiences. It's like a whole other level of application for this stuff.
Dreams are such fertile ground for exploring the subconscious mind.
Mm.
And Brooks demonstrates this beautifully with Christine, who was having those recurring nightmares about her deceased brother.
Yes, I remember that. It was heartbreaking to hear about those nightmares, but so inspiring to see how Brooks was able to help her reframe those experiences.
Instead of confronting the nightmare directly, which can sometimes be too intense,
Right.
he used a series of indirect suggestions to shift her attention and create a more positive experience within the dream.
It's almost like he was rewriting the script of her subconscious narrative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He started by having her visualize the color of the ceiling, which might seem random, but was actually a brilliant way to disengage her from those negative images and bring her into a more present-focused state.
It was like a gentle reset button for her mind.
And then he slowly guided her back into the dream, but framed it in a way that encouraged her to access positive memories and resources. He asked, what would happen if he did come back to you in your mind? It opened up the possibility for a different kind of encounter, one that wasn't rooted in fear and trauma.
That's so powerful. It's like he gave her the tools to create a more empowering and healing experience within her own mind.
And by the end of the session, she wasn't dreading those dreams anymore. She was actually looking forward to them as opportunities for growth and connection.
That's incredible. It shows how much potential we have to heal and transform even the most challenging aspects of our inner world.
Absolutely. And Brooks emphasized that this isn't about suppressing or denying difficult emotions. It's about providing the unconscious mind with alternative pathways, more positive and empowering ways of processing those experiences.
So it's like giving the subconscious mind the tools it needs to heal itself, to find a way through the darkness and emerge stronger on the other side.
Exactly. It's about tapping into our own innate capacity for growth and transformation.
This is such inspiring stuff. It makes me want to go out there and start experimenting with these techniques myself.
I encourage you to.
Oh, really?
Brooks emphasized the importance of practice in experimentation.
Okay.
And remember, you can use these techniques for more than just working with dreams. You can apply them to any area of your life where you want to create positive change.
That's so true. Whether it's overcoming fears, building confidence, or achieving goals, the possibilities are endless.
And as you start to explore these techniques, you'll not only gain a deeper understanding of your own mind, but you'll also become a more skillful communicator in all areas of your life.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I've learned a whole new language for understanding how the mind works and how to communicate with it effectively.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much power we have within ourselves to create the reality we desire.
And before we wrap things up, I think it's important to come back to that point about ethical considerations.
Right.
You mentioned earlier that we need to be mindful of how we're using these techniques.
Absolutely.
Oh.
As with any form of influence, it's crucial to use this knowledge responsibly.
It's like we're learning the secrets of mental kung fu.
Yeah.
We need to be careful not to use these powers for evil.
Exactly. It's about always acting with integrity, respecting the autonomy of others, and using this knowledge for good.
And I think it's also important to remember that even though we're diving deep into these concepts, we don't have to become master hypnotists to benefit from this knowledge.
That's true.
Okay.
Even a simple awareness of these principles can make a huge difference in how we interact with the world around us.
It's about becoming more conscious communicators, both in how we use language and how we interpret the messages we're receiving.
Exactly. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay, let's take one more quick break and then come back to explore some final thoughts and insights on indirect suggestion.
Welcome back to our deep dive into indirect suggestion.
Oh, it's fascinating stuff, isn't it?
I feel like my brain has been doing gymnastics this whole time trying to wrap itself around all these incredible concepts.
I know what you mean. It's a lot to take in, but that's what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah.
There's always another layer to uncover, another nuance to explore.
And you know, one thing that's really stuck with me is that anecdote Brooks shared about the litter in London.
Oh, yeah.
Someone simply pointed it out to him, and suddenly it was all he could see.
It's amazing how powerful a simple suggestion can be, isn't it? Just by planting that idea in his mind, they completely changed his perception of the city.
And now that we're aware of all these indirect suggestion techniques, I'm wondering if we're going to start seeing them everywhere we look.
It's definitely possible. It's like when you learn a new word and then suddenly you start hearing it everywhere. Our brains are always looking for patterns and making connections.
So maybe we'll start to notice those yes-set questions in advertising, or how politicians use embedded commands to subtly sway our opinions.
Right.
It's a bit unsettling when you think about it.
It can be, but it's also empowering.
Right.
By being aware of these techniques, we can become more conscious consumers of information. We can choose how we want to respond to those subtle influences rather than being unconsciously swayed by them.
That's a great point. It's not about becoming paranoid or suspicious of everything we hear, but rather about developing that critical awareness, that ability to discern what's genuine from what's manipulative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about taking back our power, being active participants in the communication process rather than passive recipients.
So it's like we've been given this secret decoder ring for understanding the hidden language of the mind. I like that analogy. And with this new understanding, we can navigate the world with more clarity and intention.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey.
It has.
We've explored the differences between the direct and indirect suggestion, uncovered some fascinating language patterns, and delved into the underlying mechanisms of how these techniques work on both the conscious and unconscious mind.
We have.
But I think the most important takeaway is that awareness is key.
Right.
The more we understand about the power of language and suggestion, the more empowered we become to make conscious choices about how we interact with the world around us.
Absolutely. And remember, this is just the beginning of your exploration.
Right.
There's so much more to learn and discover about the fascinating world of the mind.
I know. I'm definitely feeling inspired to keep learning and experimenting. And who knows, maybe we'll even revisit this topic again in the future.
I love that. There's always more to uncover, more insights to share.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into indirect suggestion. Thank you so much for joining us on this mind-bending journey.
It's been a pleasure exploring these concepts with you.
And to our listeners, keep those minds open, stay curious, and remember you have more power than you realize to shape your reality. Until next time.